The Will to DIY is a podcast where Ryder explains to you why you, nor I, nor he will ever be good enough.
Okay, and welcome back. This week, what we're going to talk about is Michael J. Sandel. He's a philosophy professor at Harvard. He released a book earlier this year called Tyranny of Merit: What's Become of the Common Good. I'm going to try to work through some of the ideas he brings up over the next 2 episodes. Next time, I'm going to tackle specifically education and its role in our society. But this episode is mostly focused on what happens when democracy becomes shifted into not a realm of communicative rationality as we've discussed previously, but more of a realm of winners and losers, where social mobility is a lie that increases social and financial inequality. Well, eventually, if this happens, you're bound to have a backlash. And that tends to look something like Brexit or Trump. And if we don't trust our government or our fellow man, if it's all just a battleground, then what happens to morality and the common good? Let's explore how we got here, and perhaps we can look at how we can return to a richer, more human conception of the good. Part 1. All Americans have the right to be judged on the sole basis of their individual merit, and to go just as far as their dreams and hard work will take them. Pretend that's Ronald Reagan. I don't even know what his voice sounds like. Anyway, what a great fairy tale, right? Now, as COVID hit, we were told, we're all in this together. Yet you must all stay socially apart. Together equals apart. Now, we understand that we have obligations to those around us, and we must all make some sacrifices for the common good, or at least you would think you would understand that. But COVID hit at this really odd time in our country where is outrageous inequality, and there's a lot of partisanship in America. Our market-driven mentality meant that we had at some point embraced globalization, right? We deregulated finance in the 90s. We're now offshoring our ability to produce masks or surgical equipment. And this leaves many working people without jobs or self-esteem, while we're also crippling our ability to help ourselves whenever we have a disaster like this. So we're all in this together? Yeah, not really, right? Frontline workers were by and large the working class, while the rich, the winners of globalization, well, they pulled away into their luxury version of quarantine with palm fronds and yachts and ill-fitting Speedos. And the message? Money saves you. If you're poor, get back to work. But perhaps it also woke us up to how reliant our country is on the working class. The drivers, the daycare workers, the packagers, the bus boys. But how and when did we get to the point where these people were ever considered lesser or not even thought about at all? I mean, geez, haven't you watched Fight Club? Come on. Now, down home common sense says, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Politicians end up saying, we offer equal opportunity for all to achieve their potential. We have knocked down the barriers on the road to success so that all Americans can go as far as their hard work, skill, imagination, and creativity can take them. Well, in a globalized world where we offshored your job, we now have this new hurdle that we have invented to make up for the previous hurdles. To compete, you must go to college, and then you too can rise. As Obama said, what you can learn determines what you can earn. And his favorite line used over 140 times during his presidency, you can make it if you try. But he's not the only one preaching effort in education to succeed. Reagan, both Bushes, and Clinton, they also touted these mantras, often linking them to the American dream to explain why our country is the best. This has formed a meritocratic ethic in America, where effort and hard work are rewarded with what you deserve. You get your just desserts. Yet this doesn't actually seem to be the world that we're in. I mean, do you remember the Occupy movement or the bank bailouts? Occupy was all about wealth inequality and a broken system where degrees don't get you jobs. And the bank bailout? Well, let's just wait. We'll talk about that here in a minute. While we know there are unequal talents distributed amongst people, some people are more talented than others. Yet, we're not sure why some of their rewards are so much larger than ours. We can understand a little bit. I mean, that's fair. We kind of can get that. But seriously, I mean, you have yachts, and I can't even afford Yahtzee? The overarching principle most people in a society can agree on is that we should not be held back by factors beyond our control, like race or where you're born or how poor or rich your parents are, right? These things happened to you. They're due to no fault of your own, so you should not be held back or punished because of them. So it seems astoundingly unfair to be equally hardworking, but without the gifts our society currently rewards. So, what if this bad luck is really all just about timing? Hey, Susan, here's how you throw a boomerang. Uh, okay, go get it and let's try again. I'm a CEO. I hired you to throw the boomerang. First off, you can't hire me. We don't have money anymore. Second, you were a CEO. After the collapse of civilization, now we're all just people trying to survive. Well, my skills are in recognizing talent and organizing complex stock option buyback schemes to inflate our company value and to make investors happy. You aren't capable of understanding it. I recognize your talent as a hunter, and now I will organize how to distribute the meat. Ooh, boy. First off, everyone recognizes my talent because it puts food in your belly. That's not such a big skill you got there. And we always distribute the meat equally, so you're not needed there either. Oh, and the only stock here is our pen full of goats, and maybe you can keep those investors happy, but you can't keep our goats happy, so come on. I didn't rise to the top by making anyone happy. Oh, yeah, well, that's obvious. But here, since you can't herd, hunt, or make anything or anybody happy, you're pretty much useless. It's no wonder that dystopian apocalyptic futures are so popular, right? It basically flips the prized talents, the currently prized talents, to a more obvious norm, back to this sort of hunter gatherer age of survival. Inherited wealth, complicated math, or an Ivy League education, that doesn't mean squat. In various times in history, we need to pay attention that we have revered different things and rewarded them differently. At one point, we revered scientists or artists or philosophers as celebrities. Now we tend to revere athletes or idiots on television and people's butts. But just wait. Give us a couple years and we'll find something else even dumber to revere. I mean, except butts. I mean, that's a universal. We're always going to revere those. People balk at this idea that somehow their success is actually a byproduct of society more than their own individual effort. Because they say they have indeed worked hard to get where they are. Well, yeah, sure you did, buddy. But we all worked hard, right? Or maybe we didn't, but other people have also worked hard and they didn't get where you are. They didn't even get anywhere close. I mean, do you really work harder than a roofer in the summer? I mean, and what made you so special that you're not roofing? And you're probably going to say intelligence, right? And was all of that due to you? Or did you have some help along the way? Maybe you had some middle class educated parents who helped you out. Maybe you had a teacher who gave you a little more attention than somebody else. Or maybe you were in a position and you had a network of friends that somehow sparked your intellect, and maybe you were one of the only people alive with access to a computer lab like Bill Gates. An aware person can really see the flaws and the hubris of meritocracy, basically claiming that you made it on your own merits. I mean, when you rise to the top, you are merely lucky to be in a particular place at the right time that provided you a way to achieve according to your unique gifts. Different place, different time, different culture, different society. No, wouldn't have worked for you. Now, this means it's an accident of fortune, fate, or luck. This should grant the successful in any society with a sense of grace and humility. But to so many on top, they somehow conclude that they got there by their hard work, and because of that, they deserve everything they got. And oddly enough, when you feel you deserve something, this can morph into a morality of specialness. You are special. You are entitled. As Max Weber observes, the fortunate person is seldom satisfied with the fact of being fortunate. Beyond this, he needs to know that he has the right to his good fortune. He wants to be convinced that he deserves it, and that above all, that he deserves it in comparison to others. He wishes to be allowed the belief that less fortunate are also merely experiencing their due. So, if you decide you deserve it, then what of those left behind you? Do they also deserve their fate? Well, most likely not, right? But a creeping morality of deserving righteousness has a tendency to shift this humble, I was lucky to benefit, into a very simplified disdain of, I am a smart winner and you are a dumb loser. And Sandel actually maps out the rise and the increase of the words dumb and smart. In the 1980s, they weren't used hardly at all in books, but from 1975 to 2008, dumb doubled in use and smart tripled in use. And by 2018, smart was being used in the New York Times 8 times more often than in 1980. That's insane. Bush and Clinton ended up using the word smart 450 times in speeches. Obama, he doubled it. He used it over 900 times. So when Obama says something like, it's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. I mean, that's both a moral statement and it implies you're dumb if you disagree. Not only you're amoral, but you're an idiot if you don't agree with me. And of course, we actually want both whenever we're governing, right? We want morality and intelligence with a type of civic virtue to lead us into the future. Thomas Jefferson, for instance, he favored this natural aristocracy. This is very much based on virtues and talents, which is, of course, much preferred to an artificial aristocracy founded on wealth and birth. So, yeah, meritocracy is probably better than aristocracy. But where we encounter a problem is when we presuppose merit, the rising of a person to a position they inhabit, is somehow proof of morality. To be well placed is to be meritorious. To rise in one arena somehow allows people to assume virtue or knowledge in other arenas because they're moral, right? Which really, these people don't have the life experience or wisdom to judge properly in these different arenas. So, anyway, let's move back to these very smart, credentialed people in our government. Most all of them have college degrees, and most of them have advanced degrees. And having smart people govern is good if they're sympathetic, if they have Aristotle's practical wisdom and civic virtue. But in the book, The Best and the Brightest, this is JFK's dream team that he assembled of these super smart, highly degreed cabinet members. And what did all these super smart people do for America? Well, they led us into the Vietnam War, a complete clusterfuck. Obama's cabinet of advanced degrees, with 2/3 from the Ivy League, they shared the same, quote, arrogance and detachment from the everyday lives of most Americans. Obama's team bailed out Wall Street and banks without holding them accountable. And he let them take multi-million-dollar bonuses for destroying the economy. Here's your reward. Thanks for screwing up. I mean, this really discredited the Democratic Party, the party that claims to be for the people, in the eyes of the people. And these people were the ones who were the most hurt by the recession and the collapse. I mean, could it get any worse than having the intellectual elite that pervade the left, the hubris of the highly educated know-it-alls who won't listen to anybody? Well, yes, it actually could get worse. You could have an insecure egomaniac who listens to no one. But oddly enough, as Sam Harris mentioned, Trump is openly flawed. And weirdly enough, he accepts people as they are with their flaws, without the same disdain and judgments of the snobby, well-educated elites who keep saying you aren't smart enough. You just need to shut up, take your welfare, and let the smart people run the country. Sandel cites studies showing that the US and Europe's biggest prejudice or bias is not actually race, it's not ethnicity, it's not obesity, it's not religion, it's not being blind. It's the uneducated. And that includes the uneducated despising themselves. They consider themselves dumb. While many people will denounce racism or sexism, most are openly unapologetic about their attitudes towards the less educated. Now, I'm going to be doing a whole second episode on Tyranny of Merit, and it's really about how rampant and destructive the education system is. It creates a diploma divide and credentialization that really sorts out Americans, and that sort of maintains this winner-loser culture. And it limits the ability to rise while demeaning those who don't rise. And of course, it also ties your market earning potential from your degree to your value as a person in a meritocratic society. This just entrenches the view of the undereducated as the underclass, both mentally and morally bankrupt, right? And to the rich, they just become more dead weight they have to support. This is really not about humanity or the common good at this point. Now, of course, there has been pushback against these bullying tactics and these sort of fanciful narratives by the rich. Obama, in particular, saying things like, "You didn't build that," referring to the infrastructure that they ride on to make their wealth. If you can make vast fortunes, you're most likely doing it based on systems that were put in place earlier. Roads, electricity, the stock market, the economy, or how about the public education that trains your workers? Now, this is a way to point out that we are indeed in a shared place. and we can't take complete responsibility for our success. Yet, because you became a hedge fund manager after going to an Ivy League school, it does require effort. So these people think that they have legitimately earned their success. And yes, you have worked hard. No one's denying that you haven't. But is your hard work any harder than the man who built the road? Well, no, it's just different. Is your work more productive? Does it contribute to the common good? Not really. Well, this guy's actually does.
Hey, Cuthbert, what'd you do today?
Oh, Shane, it's you again. I could smell you on the stairs.
Yeah, right. That's from repairing the motorway. The missus don't appreciate it none when I stink up the house, but seriously, an honest wage keeps that roof over our head. So, yeah, what did you end up making for our great country today?
Oh, well, I made £1 million by betting that the market would drop in value, and then after it dropped, I bet that it would increase in value, and after it did, I cashed out before it dropped again. And then I charged all the transaction fees to my clients.
Wait, you made money from thin air just by betting on stuff? Are you gonna take this money and make a business or, really grow something?
Oh, God, no. There's too much risk and too many taxes in the real world. Why would I ever do that?
Increasingly, the common good is defined through the GDP of the economy, where somehow manipulating market mechanisms can assign you valuable or worthy. So the intelligent tinker with the economic machine rather than addressing the moral and civic concerns of rising inequality, national borders, the dignity of work, or what citizens owe to each other. Public discourse becomes hollowed out, or it's basically just made so shallow it's meaningless. So we really only have to address topics we can all agree on now, right? And that's a good economy, because we're about consumerism, not the common good. And yet Sandel brings up that the finance industry, where many of these smartest, our best and brightest end up, it has grown increasingly complex, yielding bigger profits for those engaged in it, but that does absolutely nothing to make the economy more productive in actual terms. It's estimated that the last 20 to 30 years of financial activity has extracted rents from the actual economy rather than delivering economic value. It's basically a parasite sucking off of the real economy. If you want to talk makers and takers, as Paul Ryan did when discussing the welfare state, it has become increasingly obvious that those in the financial industry are the takers, not the makers or the producers that they seem to be cast as. Finances, of course, have turned into this kind of like bizarre casino-like market all of a sudden. And roughly 15%, only 15%, flows into productive enterprises. While the rest of the money, it's gambled on speculative markets and fancy derivatives, and these actually hinder economic growth rather than promoting it. Sandel offers a possible solution for this kind of gambling. Taxes speculative or high-frequency trading, just like it's a sin tax, just like we do with actual gambling. If you're just gambling on the odds of numbers moving around and you're not producing anything real, well, we're going to take a bigger cut of that, and we'll take a lesser cut if you actually put it into something productive. As Sandel says, quote, "This not only raises revenue, but expresses society's judgment about what counts as a valuable contribution to the common good." Part 2. Let's re-engage the notion of social mobility and upward mobility, or basically the idea that your merits allow you to rise. You rise according to your talents. But let's remember also, if your talents allow you to rise, much like Katniss and the Mockingjay, you and everyone around you will probably be broken in the end. So let's talk about how this upward mobility or rising really functions if you consider it as a ladder with 5 rungs that we're trying to climb. So poverty is rung 1, and being in the top 20% would be rung 5. In some countries like Sweden and the Netherlands, they have a much more level field, and what you earn is hardly determined at all by what your parents might have earned, right? They have a lot of mobility there. They can be at rung 5, you may end up dropping all the way down to rung 1, but then your kid can make it all the way back up to rung 5. Now, in America, if your parents are in the top 5th of earners, you're almost guaranteed to remain in the top 5th, and your kid as well. Meanwhile, if you have the luck of being born into a family at rung 1, it's very difficult, maybe even a 3% chance to get even 2 rungs higher. So now you somehow made it to rung 4 from rung 1, and this means your kids have this strong likelihood of remaining at rung 4, so you've done good for them. But unfortunately, because we're in America, maybe they're going to drop to a 3. Because the other crazy thing is, children are more likely in America to make less money than their parents. So this whole time we've been thinking we're on an upward trajectory. Well, no, not really. And not only that, but in America, the rungs are being spread even further apart. Since 1964, after counting for inflation, workers' wages have remained stagnant. This is basically a flat line for the last 60 years. Meanwhile, the wealth of the country has exploded. It's more than tripled. What happened to all that extra money? It didn't go to the workers, right? That money remains in the hands of the richest few, known as the 1%, who happen to hold more wealth than 80% of the rest of Americans. In large part, if you're in the bottom half of earners, you haven't seen a tangible quality of life increase in 60 years. Now, other research also shows that looking at the top 10% versus the bottom 10%, the factor of their earnings has divided even further. So in the 70s, the top 10% made 6 times more, but now they make nearly 9 times more. So these rungs are getting stretched out further and further.
My grandpa was CEO of this company in 1965. Back then, his average worker only made $7,000 per year. So you see, you should really be quite happy to be making $38,000 a year. It's quite an increase.
Hey, how much did your grandpa make?
I don't see how that's relevant, but he made $140,000 per year.
Well, hey, how much do you make?
That's really just not relevant. What is relevant, however, is you should be quite happy with how much you make.
Oh, come on, just tell us.
Fine. I make $10 million per year. That's my annual compensation.
Well, research says $75,000 is the ideal wage for happiness. So really, we're quite justified in our sadness, but you could fix all that with just a snap of your fingers and you'd still be a millionaire.
Well, yes, I could fix your problems, I suppose. But then what incentive would you have to work hard, to rise? The only way to grow is through hardship and overcoming.
Ain't this a family-owned business? You ain't never had no hardship.
Meeting adjourned, and Kyle, you're fired.
Another area that maybe is more close to home, it's more popular anyway, is sports. So LeBron James is compensated $89 million per year. $89 million. This is over 14 times more than the average player. Is he that much better? I mean, he might score and rebound 3 times as much, but not 14 times as much. So the outcome isn't actually aligned with the payment here. And let's not even get into how or why our society pays our entertainers more than nurses, doctors, scientists, and educators, but to consider that a sports star making 60 or 70 millions would still hold out until he got even more money. Oh God, that just makes me kind of sick, right? Like, what are you going to do with all that extra dough? And when you ask somebody, like, is this really worth it? They say, it's not about the money. It's about the respect. Oh, it's the principle of the thing then. It's the respect, right? Oh, okay. Well, what does that say to the farmer in Nebraska? How about the teacher? How about the nurse? How about the plumber that we won't pay a living wage? Does that mean we don't respect them? What does that say about what our society values and respects? So anyway, numerically, we can see what our society values and how it's structured by looking at the market. The story that we get is that the hard workers will rise. Those who try enough can succeed. And the myth is that the market pays people according to their value and contribution. This assumes that the market is a neutral mechanism, right? People like to talk about it as if it's just market economics. It has nothing to do with my decisions. Yet we have governmental policy that controls financial movement. So none of this is really laissez-faire market corrections. It's governmental intervention to establish what we, as a society, deem worthy, and it punishes what we don't. Policy states our virtue, not necessarily the market. So let's take an example or two that proves the lie that the market dictates the value of your contribution to society. We already talked about hedge fund managers as parasites involved in gambling, right? Now, even if you owned an actual gambling casino in Vegas, is your contribution to society more value than, say, a pediatrician? I mean, can we do the math on this one? Is it like I help society by employing X number of people, and we take that and we somehow divide it by, I provide the means for people to ruin their lives and family, and you get a number at the end of it. And I mean, The funny thing about it all is that it's completely legal, but it draws us into this really queasy moral math of markets somehow setting our values. A good example of something like this is Breaking Bad, right? We have Walter White, the earnest teacher who is super smart and he has rich former classmates, but he's broke and he's working to educate the youth and he's super frustrated, so he breaks bad, finding that making high-grade crystal meth is what the market actually values. It isn't education or being a good person. Please, don't be so naive. Of course, he grows into this kind of like badass egomaniac and he finally has money to burn, but at what cost to society and himself? He's actually corroding the common good for personal gain. Obviously, his actions are illegal, right? Versus the casino owner. But they're interestingly similar situations showing that the morality of the market cannot be trusted to properly value people's contributions to society. Interestingly, Elon Musk, a prime example of rags to riches meritocracy and success, just this week was announced as the second richest man. And immediately on Twitter, all of the abusive practices he enacted against employees and how he held counties hostages to he'd move his business rather than following their regulations, these things have all come out to highlight the practice that to grow a business or to be a good businessman is actually corrosive. And if you get big enough in a market-driven economy, any evils are forgiven under the absolution of our God, the GDP. Bless you, my son. What is good for business is good for the nation. Go forth and sin some more. Part 3. Luck. For many kids, especially those born poor, the dream is, of course, to hone your natural talents, be it sports or entertainment, as a way to rise. Because equally, they see that those that took the education seriously, some of them are still not getting ahead. So really, why not try for the big times as something fun if the odds are stacked against you? This brings up people like LeBron James or Cardi B or J.K. Rowling, these kind of people who have made it big, right? They're talented, they worked hard to get there. And here's the thing about talent. You're gifted with it. It is luck of the draw. One kid in a family might get the brains, and the other gets the quick reaction times. This is known as luck dispersal. A society really should set up a system that does not overly reward luck, but equally luck and bad luck happen, so we try to equalize for that. I mean, what do? Do you cap the rewards of the lucky and feed their profits back down, distributing it to the unlucky? Well, this is known as sort of luck egalitarianism, where society tries to control for the equality of outcome, where the end result, the outcome, is more controlled across a society. But it's also an example of distributive justice, where we take from the lucky to make up for the unlucky, and we try to make the world more just instead of turning our backs on the unfairness of the world. But this measure of luck to determine who is the most unlucky and then we dole out justice to certain people, it still has some flaws of the meritocratic system where we're still judging people, right? We're claiming that some people are more worthy than others, and we're making people confess how bad their life is just to get assistance, which is not only patronizing, but it also sort of robs them of the dignity that we really want all people to have. Now, using luck or the market as a system of evaluation, it's obviously faulty. When people rant against capitalism, in large part, I think they're actually ranting against the system that devalues human dignity and honor in favor of profits and ledgers. Sure, the economic pie is now bigger, right? It's 3 times bigger. But our slices haven't gotten any bigger. Remember that 60% of Americans, they haven't seen a bump in salary in 60 years despite economic growth. And all this distribution of profits that's been promised by policy and reform and taxation, none of it seems to be making it down to the actual people. It gets somehow caught up in the bureaucracy and skimmed off by the rich and the powerful. Trickle-down economics? Yeah, that must be the biggest lie since the Catholics invented indulgences. And of course, you don't need me telling you this stuff. You know things are broken. You know that people work hard and don't receive what they're due. Meritocracy itself, it isn't exactly the problem. It's more that it has been used in conjunction with other things. And it's really been used to devalue human dignity, prestige, and moral virtue and honor. So we need to find a way to reassert those.
Dave, what are you doing? Why, I'm reading, Dwayne. Yeah, that's obvious, but don't you have to get that trim finished on the countertops, like, right now? Yes, I do need to get that finished, but I try to read either Aristotle or Kant during my 30-minute lunch break. Look, Dave, I know you missed out on going to college because you had to take care of your mom, but you should really just focus on work and hide that highfalutin crap before George sees you, or he's gonna think you're getting ideas. God, of course I have ideas. Just because I work with my hands doesn't mean I'm an idiot. Well, look, I know that and you know that, but you better get to acting like an idiot or you won't be working at all.
Workers, for instance, once had libraries where a mechanic might be reading politics and philosophy on his break right next to the owner. A degree really was secondary to the ability to think. Any man could have ideas, and jobs were shaped to provide dignity and participation in the great public ventures. Today, after going through Fordism and Taylorism, we now just want automatons. The more ambition, thinking, or intelligence, the worse it is for you in most jobs. And so not only do the jobs reduce the ability to contribute or participate or find dignity in your work, but they actively discourage it. And then we set up a hierarchy of dumb and smart, winners and losers. And Sandel remarks that many of these less educated laborers, they've been waiting in line, working backbreaking jobs for generations in some cases, and have been patriots really loyal to America. They've worked hard, played by the rules, and yet they've been neglected, watching more and more be taken from them by globalizations and policies that were supposed to help them, but have somehow hollowed out their community. So to say to somebody who has lived in poverty, has been through loss and hardship, that they should vote Democrat for a social welfare system that would help them, and when they don't, you say, they're voting against their best interests, and they must be dumb. All of this is really tone deaf and missing the point. Once again, smart, educated people making an elitist assumption while looking down their nose and ignoring the fact that over the last 60 years of politics, these people's lives have been made harder. Now you want them to trust you? I don't know about that, right? Many people in America don't want welfare, which provides just another way for somebody to look down on a working man as useless, as a burden. As W.E.B. Du Bois says in 1935, "It must be remembered that the white group of laborers, while they received a low wage, were compensated in part by a sort of public and psychological wage." What workers are really fighting for is prestige and honor. They know the work they do is vital, as proven in many cases by COVID. They're not looking for a welfare state of distributive justice or luck egalitarianism or a handout where you take money from the rich to placate the poor, but they do want contributive justice, where they're recognized for participating in a country they love. Have you heard of deaths of despair? Ann Case and Angus Deaton, they coined the term when showing that despite life expectancy steadily increasing, in 2014 to 2017, it suddenly started declining. Not because of failure of modern medicine, of course, but due to suicides, drug overdoses, and alcoholic liver disease. These are all various ways of self-inflicted death. The numbers of these kind of deaths tripled from 1990 to 2017 until it became the leading cause of death of men for the ages 45 to 54. Almost all of these deaths came from men without a bachelor's degree, so undereducated, and it was concluded that it was not just poverty, but it was a, quote, long-term and slowly unfolding loss of a way of life. Michael Young, author of The Rise of Meritocracy, written in 1958, he says, "In a society that makes so much of merit, it's hard to be judged as having none. No underclass has ever been left as morally naked as that." Young's book was a dystopian novel written from a future in 2033, and much like 1984, Brave New World, he foresaw the negative consequences of where our society was heading. He saw that while not fair, at least the class system had the benefit of people knowing that they were just simply born unlucky. They were not a failure as a person. And even those on top knew that any of their subordinates could probably do any job as well, if not better, than they could. There's really kind of a moral refuge in this place that the meritocratic societies do not offer. Saying, "I work in the stables because I never had a chance," strangely offers more solace than "everyone had a chance and I had a chance and I just couldn't make it." Winners of a meritocracy, bolstered by success, no longer have this self-doubt or self-criticism at all. They see their success as a virtue within them. What Young saw was that meritocracy does not actually solve for inequality. It just redistributes inequality from a system of class or wealth to ability.
which is actually much, much more personal. I mean, it's really a lack inside of you. It's not something done to you. It's not how you were born, but a piece missing deep within you. You are, through society's guiding principles, inferior. And you have no refuge from which to gain solace from this. The novel concludes with Young predicting in 2034 the resentment of the less educated would boil over, causing a populist backlash. And really, he was only off by 18 years. Of course, it's hard to think of merit as a negative these days, right? Because all of our politicians use it as a positive. Michael Young even issued a statement when Tony Blair used meritocracy as a positive, and he asked him to retract the statement or to at least acknowledge the dark side, the downside of what meritocracy could bring. Part 4. In the conclusion of The Tyranny of Merit, Sandel tells a story of Henry Aaron, or Hank Aaron, where his biographer basically reveals that as a young boy, Henry had to watch his father surrender his place in line to white people in the general store. But at the age of 13, he saw Jackie Robinson break the color barrier in baseball. This really fired him up, so he practiced and practiced, but of course he didn't have any money, so his brother would pitch bottle caps to him that he would hit with a stick. Of course, you know he went on to break Babe Ruth's home run record. So the biographer Bryant says, quote, "Hitting, it could be argued, represented the first meritocracy in Henry's life." So it's really hard to read this line without loving meritocracy, right? I mean, it's seen as the ultimate answer to injustice. It's a vindication of talent over prejudice. Thus, perhaps we see meritocracy as just. But Sandel reminds us this is a mistake. The moral isn't hooray for meritocracy. It's that what we should do is despise a system where the only escape is through hitting home runs, or dunking a basketball, or entertaining somebody. Equality of opportunity, offering upward mobility as justice for those that are forced to live in shitty conditions, that's not a good society. It's really a promise of escape from a prison that deforms you so you can squeeze through the bars. Beyond equality of results, which is basically forcing equal outcomes for all, we also have equality of opportunity, which is equal access and a chance to rise. But these are really remedial ideas. These are partial solutions for a society when we could be providing equality of condition. In 1931, a Brit named Tawney says, and this, by the way, can be related to all democracy, "Social well-being depends on cohesion and solidarity. Individual happiness does not only require men to be free to rise, it also requires that they should be able to live a life of dignity and culture, whether they rise or not." To close out, how can we create a robust culture that provides equality of condition, not just opportunity or results? Our society is more fragmented and isolated than ever, allowing us to basically not encounter anyone who is not just like us. It's oddly more individualistic than ever, yet people are strangely more vitriolically righteously aligned with blind groupthink tribal politics now. It's now more poisonous to marry across political lines than religious lines. So how do we open a conversation for the common good? If you fall for society's goal, that is to maximize the welfare for consumers, then society's basically just economics, right? That's the only role of our government. And morality is no longer a bond between citizens because that doesn't exist in that realm. If, however, you think there's a way to share goals and promote a vibrant communal life, we have to have discourse in common spaces. We must bump into each other and abide the differences and negotiate toward what makes a common good. There, but for the grace of God, or the accident of birth, or the mystery of fate, go I. As Sandel says, such humility is the beginning of the way back from the harsh ethic that drives us apart. All right, thank you for listening. Next episode, which is mostly written, will be on how credentials and the education system are hurting our democracy, and they're promoting a winner-take-all competition that just further divides our country. If you enjoy what you heard today, please subscribe, and please share this with a friend who might be interested as well. Until next time.